Life had its own way of being unremarkable for me. My name's Rita, and at 29, you'd find me tucked away in the local library. It wasn't glamorous or thrilling, but it was mine. The books were my companions, and the dusty shelves, my domain. I wasn't one for the spotlight, happy to fade into the background. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew your business before you did. My daily routine rarely varied: wake up, work, and then home to my tiny apartment filled with second-hand furniture and a mountain of books. My social life was non-existent, and I was fine with that, or so I kept telling myself. Ethan came into my life on a day much like any other. He was looking for a book, something different, he said. His smile was easy, and his voice had a warmth to it that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Hey, could you help me find a book? I'm feeling adventurous," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sure, what genre are you interested in?" I asked, adjusting my glasses, trying not to get too caught up in his gaze. "I don't know, surprise me," he replied with a grin that suggested he enjoyed the mundane challenge he'd set before me. That was the beginning of everything. Our conversations became a regular part of my days. He'd ask about books, and I'd recommend titles, but soon those conversations shifted from the pages of novels to the details of our lives. Ethan was different. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel heard for the first time in a long while. One day, he came in looking more determined than usual. "You know, Rita, you're the most interesting person I've met in this town. Why do you hide in here all day?" he asked, leaning on the counter, a playful challenge in his eyes. I laughed, a sound that felt strange even to my own ears. "Well, where else would I go? This town isn't exactly bursting with excitement." Ethan's response was quick. "Maybe you just need someone to explore it with. How about dinner tonight? My treat." I hesitated, not used to this kind of attention. "I don't know, Ethan. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? You spend an evening out with a guy who enjoys your book recommendations. Plus, I promise to make it worth your while. You can show me this hidden gem of a town," he coaxed, his confidence infectious. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. "Okay, sure. But no fancy places, I don't do well with all that pomp." "Deal," Ethan said, his smile lighting up the room. "I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable." That night changed everything. Ethan showed me parts of the town I'd never seen, despite having lived here my whole life. He made me laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that I hadn't known I was capable of. He listened to my stories, my dreams, and my fears, never once making me feel small or insignificant. As we walked back to my apartment, he stopped and looked at me, a seriousness in his eyes. "Rita, I know we've only just met, but there's something about you. You're not like anyone I've ever known. You're genuine, and in a world full of fakes, that's rare." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. "Ethan, He cut me off, gently placing a finger on my lips. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see you, Rita. I see the person you are, and I like what I see." Ethan had always been the sweet spot in my day, making everything seem brighter with his care and affection. He had this way of making me feel seen, calling me beautiful, kind, and smart, things I hardly believed about myself. It was his warmth that won me over, making the idea of forever seem not just possible, but desirable. When he popped the question, it felt like a dream. "Marry me, Rita. I can't imagine my life without you," he had said, his eyes shining with sincerity. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I breathed out, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. But before we could get lost in the whirlwind of wedding planning, there was one crucial step we had to take: meeting his parents. Ethan had given me a heads up, a sort of pre-warning. "My folks, they have a bit of a high standard for who I bring home. But don't sweat it, okay? They're gonna love you once they see how amazing you are," he assured me, though his nonchalance did little to ease my nerves. I was a wreck before the meeting, rummaging through my wardrobe for something that screamed modest yet dignified. It felt like an impossible dress code to crack. Ethan, on the other hand, was the picture of calm, almost disinterested, as if the outcome of this meeting didn't weigh on him at all. "You're overthinking it, Rita. Just wear what you're comfortable in," he said casually, which only frayed my nerves further. The day arrived, and I chose a simple blue dress that I hoped struck the right balance. As we drove to his parents' house, Ethan seemed more preoccupied with the music on the radio than the impending introduction. "You sure they're gonna like me?" I asked, seeking some reassurance. They'll come around. Just be yourself," Ethan replied, his attention briefly flitting to me before returning to the road. His laid-back attitude felt jarring compared to the storm of anxiety brewing inside me. Walking up to the door of Ethan's childhood home, my heart was pounding. His earlier warnings echoed in my head, painting a picture of the scrutiny I was about to face. The door swung open, and we were greeted by Ethan's parents, their expressions hard to read. The dinner that followed was a minefield. Ethan's parents grilled me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than casual dinner conversation. "So, Rita, Ethan tells us you work at a library. Do you see yourself doing that long term?" his father asked, his tone suggesting he found my job lacking. I fumbled for an answer, trying to sound confident. "I love working there. It's fulfilling in a way I can't quite describe," I said, hoping my passion would be enough to win them over. Ethan was strangely quiet throughout, offering little support as I navigated the barrage of questions and veiled criticisms. It felt like I was alone on the battlefield, with Ethan retreating into a role of passive observer. As we drove home, the silence in the car was deafening. I couldn't help but feel disappointed, not just in the evening's events, but in Ethan's indifference. "I thought you said they'd warm up to me." I finally broke the silence, my voice tinged with hurt. Ethan shrugged, a frustratingly nonchalant gesture. "Give it time, Rita. They just need to get to know you better," he said, his words doing little to comfort me. After a few more dinners that felt more like interrogations than friendly meals, it was clear Ethan's folks weren't my biggest fans. They saw me as some kind of gold digger, I guess, which couldn't be further from the truth. I was never after Ethan's money. Heck, I barely knew about it until he brought it up himself one evening, saying, "My parents are a bit old school, you know? They worry about the weirdest things, like money and status." One night, Ethan came home looking more serious than usual. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, avoiding my eyes. That's when I knew something was up. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling my stomach tie up in knots. "It's my parents," he started, finally looking at me. "They're insisting we sign a prenup." "A prenup?" The word felt foreign, bitter on my tongue. "Ethan, you know I don't care about your money, right?" He sighed, running his hands through his hair. I know. And I don't care about it either, not when it comes to us. But they're adamant about it. They think it'll protect both of us or whatever." I was hurt, not gonna lie. It felt like they were already betting on our failure. But I loved Ethan more than I cared about his parents' approval or some stupid agreement. "Fine," I said, more sharply than I intended. "Let's sign it and be done with it. Your money, my money, whatever. I don't care. I just want you." Ethan looked relieved, and a part of me hated that. "Thank you, babe. I hate this as much as you do, but it's just a piece of paper. It won't change anything between us." So, we signed the damn thing. Some lawyer his parents knew drew it up, making sure neither of us could touch the other's stuff if things went south. It felt like signing a declaration of distrust before we even started, but I pushed those thoughts away. I was in love, and love was supposed to conquer all, right? Our wedding was nothing grand, just the way I wanted it. A few close friends, an intimate ceremony, and the promise of forever. I moved into Ethan's place shortly after. It was a nice house, nothing too fancy, but it felt miles away from my old apartment. Ethan's parents lived nearby, which I soon found out meant surprise visits that were more about checking up on me than anything else. Life with Ethan started off like something out of a fairy tale, but it wasn't long before the gloss started to fade, revealing the grim reality beneath. The shift wasn't overnight, but the signs were there, creeping in slowly, eroding what we had built. His mother, Linda, was the first crack in our perfect picture. She'd drop by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house like she was taking inventory. "Remember, this is Ethan's house. Everything here is his." I tried to keep my cool, replying, "I'm well aware, Linda. I'm not here for your son's things. I love him." She scoffed. "Love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Just remember, if you ever leave, you leave with what you came with, nothing." One day, she paraded around the house, pointing out every piece of furniture, every appliance, every knickknack that Ethan owned. "See this couch? Ethan's. That painting? Also Ethan's. Remember, dear, in case things go south, you have no claim over any of it," she said, her voice laced with venomous sweetness. It was as if she relished reminding me of my place in their world. Ethan's father, George, wasn't any better. He and Linda acted like they owned our house, not just visiting. They'd demand coffee the moment they walked in, critique how I made it too weak or too strong, then settle in front of the TV, expecting me to wait on them hand and foot. "Grab us some of those chips, will you? And maybe wash those clothes piling up in the corner while you're at it," George would say, not even bothering to look at me. The worst part? Ethan never said a word against it. He'd laugh along, adding his own jabs. "Yeah, she's still learning how to do things right around here. Give her time." I felt like I was losing my mind. This wasn't the man I married, this was someone else, someone cruel and dismissive. "Do you even hear yourself? How can you let them treat me like this?" I'd confront Ethan after his parents left. "Babe, they're just set in their ways. You know how old people are." He'd shrug it off, making it sound like I was the one overreacting. "They don't mean anything by it. Plus, you know we're on their dime. Can't bite the hand that feeds, right?" That line hit me like a slap in the face. So, that was it. I was just the freeloader, the girl who married into their little empire and had to play by their rules or get out. My job at the library, which I loved, was a joke to them, just another reason to look down on me. The days blurred into each other, each one a repetition of the last, until that unremarkable Tuesday when everything changed. I was at work, shelving books, when I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, doubling me over. It wasn't just stress, it was something more, something worse. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't help but think how this was a new low. Alone, in pain, and not a single message or call from Ethan. Just when I thought things couldn't get any darker, a knock on the door heralded a visitor I never expected. "Rita Turner?" The man at the door was dressed in a suit, holding a briefcase, looking wildly out of place in the sterile hospital room. "Yeah, that's me. Who are you?" My voice was weak, tired from the pain and the endless cycle of disappointment. "I'm Michael Johnson, a notary. I have something important to discuss with you." His tone was formal, but there was something in his eyes that made me want to listen. I motioned for him to continue, curiosity piqued despite the situation. "It's about your great-uncle, Edward Turner. He passed away recently, and, well, you're his sole heir. Rita, he left you an inheritance." The words didn't make sense at first. "Are you sure you've got the right person? I haven't seen him for 15 years. Michael nodded. "Quite sure. He was a private man, but always remembered you. Wanted to make sure you were taken care of." Lying in the hospital bed, feeling a mix of confusion and anticipation, I watched as the notary prepared to delve into the specifics of my great-uncle's will. He cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and laid out the documents in front of him. "Rita, your great-uncle was a man of substantial wealth and taste. He left you quite the inheritance. We're not just talking about cash here, though there's plenty of that, $20 million to be exact, Michael began, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. I blinked, still trying to wrap my head around the numbers. $20 million? I echoed, feeling my voice crack. That's right, he continued, unfazed by my shock. But there's more. You're also inheriting shares in several large companies. These are not minor investments, we're talking significant stakes in some of the most stable and profitable firms out there. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what he was saying. Owning parts of companies I'd only heard about on the news seemed like a fantasy. And there's the property, Michael went on, flipping through the papers. An old, large house in one of the most prestigious areas. It's not just any house, Rita. It's a mansion with history, acres of land, and it's all yours now. I tried to imagine the house, the kind of place I'd only seen in movies. It was overwhelming, to say the least. Don't forget about the antique car, he added with a slight smile, as if anticipating my reaction. A classic, fully restored, and in mint condition. It's a collector's dream. I chuckled, the situation bordering on surreal. An antique car, too? What am I going to do with that? I barely drive as it is. Michael's smile widened. Well, it's yours to do with as you please. Maybe take it for a spin now and then? And then, there's the furniture and paintings inside the house, genuine antiques, some of them centuries old. Your great-uncle had an eye for the finer things in life. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as I tried to digest everything he was saying. So, I've inherited a fortune, a company, a mansion, an antique car, and a collection of art and furniture? That's unbelievable. It's all yours, Rita. Your great-uncle wanted to make sure you were well taken care of. It seems he saw something special in you. Special? I felt anything but, especially lying in a hospital bed after the worst few months of my life. Yet, here I was, a millionaire many times over, entrusted with a legacy I didn't know existed. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, feeling a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. We'll take it one step at a time, he assured me. I'm here to help you through the entire process. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed on the screen for the first time in days. Ignoring it, I turned back to Michael. What happens now? We'll need to process some paperwork, but the inheritance is yours. Your life is about to change, Rita. Change it did. After the unexpected windfall landed in my lap, Ethan and his folks turned a new leaf, or so it seemed. Their daily hospital visits were like scenes from a sappy movie. Ethan, who couldn't be bothered to check on me before, now hovered constantly, adjusting my blanket with a concerned furrow on his brow. How are you feeling today, love? He'd ask, his voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach his eyes. His mother, Linda, was even more theatrical, if possible. Darling, I'm going to cook your favorite lasagna when you get back home. Just you wait, she said, her smile wide but not quite reaching her eyes. It was all too much, too sudden. Yet, I played along, smiling weakly, thanking them for their care. But suspicion gnawed at me, urging me to look beyond their acts. So, one day, I did just that. After their routine visit, I mustered the strength to slip out of my bed and follow them, my heart pounding with every step. Hiding behind a corner, I listened in as their true selves unfolded with no audience to perform for. Their laughter was the first thing I heard, harsh and jarring. Can you believe how easy it is? She's terribly stupid. She's eating right out of our hands, Ethan said, a chuckle escaping his lips. Linda was more calculating, her voice sharp as she laid out their plan. Make sure she makes a baby with you, Ethan. Once she does, she won't ever be able to leave us. Then, we'll have a real hold on her and her fortune. Their words, cruel and cold, didn't shock me. Disappointment filled me, yes, but surprise? Not in the slightest. They showed their true colors, and I was done painting over them in shades of denial. Silently, I made my way back to my hospital bed, their mocking words fueling a fire within me. They saw me as nothing more than a ticket to wealth, a means to secure their future. But I wasn't going to play their game. Not anymore. Lying in that bed, a plan began to take shape, clear and firm. I was going to turn the tables on Ethan and his conniving family. They underestimated me, saw me as weak, but I was about to show them just how wrong they were. Back at the house after being discharged, I felt like a stranger walking into what was supposed to be my home. Ethan and his parents were there, waiting, their faces painted with fake concern and eagerness. The atmosphere was thick, charged with unspoken tension and expectation. Ethan was the first to break the silence, his voice a blend of feigned sweetness and underlying greed. "Babe, you're home. How are you feeling? We've been so worried about you." Ignoring the lump in my throat, I met his gaze squarely, seeing the man I once thought I knew. "I'm feeling better, thanks. But we need to talk." "All of us," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Linda, ever the actress, stepped forward, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "Of course, dear. We're here for you. Whatever you need." It was now or never. I took a deep breath and laid out my cards. "I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. And before you ask, no, you won't see a dime of my inheritance." The room fell silent, the air sucked out of it as if by a vacuum. Ethan's face paled, his mask slipping to reveal the panic underneath. "Divorce? But why? I thought we were happy?" "Happy?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "You, your mom, and your dad have made my life a living hell. You've treated me like a servant, not a wife. And now, suddenly, you're worried about me because I'm worth something to you?" Ethan stammered, struggling to find the words, but Linda, always quick, jumped in. "This is nonsense. We've always treated you like family. You're imagining things, dear." Rolling my eyes, I pulled out the prenuptial agreement from my bag, waving it in front of them. This is what saved me. You thought you could play me, but I'm not the naive girl you took me for." George, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice a mix of anger and defeat. "You'll regret this. We're your family." "No, you were never my family. A family doesn't treat one of their own like dirt and then turn sweet when money comes into the picture. I'm done here." Moving into my own place was the breath of fresh air I desperately needed. The apartment was small and cozy, a stark contrast to the life I'd left behind. It wasn't just a new living space, it was my declaration of independence, my fresh start. The phone call started almost immediately. Ethan, with his voice dripping with desperation, was the first to break the silence. "Rita, please, you've got to come back. We can work this out, I know we can." His pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done, and no amount of begging could change that. "Ethan, it's over. I'm not coming back. You need to accept that," I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Not long after, Linda chimed in, her tone a toxic mix of anger and guilt-tripping. "Ungrateful. After everything we've done for you. You owe us, Rita. You're making a huge mistake." "Owe you? For what, Linda? For making me feel like nothing more than a burden?" "No, I don't owe you anything. Goodbye." Hanging up on her felt like shedding a heavy weight, a final cut from the ties that bound me to a life of misery. The divorce was a relief, a clean break from a past that had threatened to consume me. Through friends, I heard about the fallout between Ethan and his parents. The irony wasn't lost on me, the very document they had insisted on, the prenuptial agreement, was now the source of their family strife. With my great-uncle's inheritance securely in my name, I found purpose in generosity. A significant portion went to charities that mattered to me, causes that would make a difference in the world. But it was the bookstore that became my passion project, a cozy haven for lovers of old and rare books. It was my way of reconnecting with the world on my terms. My journey hadn't been easy, fraught with challenges and heartache, but standing in my bookstore, surrounded by the stories of countless others, I knew I had found my happy ending. It wasn't just about moving on from Ethan and his family's manipulation, it was about rediscovering who I was and what I loved. Here's to new beginnings, I toasted to myself one quiet evening after closing up shop. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, filled with possibilities and the promise of newfound happiness.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.